Seeing none, so we'll go straight to questions, unless you had any other desires. I trust that each of you will be able to see our full remarks for our priorities for the year. You each know, most everyone here knows us, so we'll dispense the introductions and go right to the questions. And I would propose that we start with Parks and Recreation as an area. And we received a question that I will start on, and then colleagues certainly jump in if there's pieces of it that answers to this question that you'd like to focus on. So the question was about the Parks and Rec. I don't think that it was in the resolution, but it could have been referred to. I couldn't see the full piece, but the Parks and Recreation Bond Funding Allocation Study. It's a 28-page document, and there is an associated resolution which may have some overlap with Ms. Bading's discussion. But basically, the question is about, have we considered the importance of open space that the Civic Federation has focused on, and in particular, have we considered that study? And the answer to that is yes. Staff has, and we have as a board. I can say for my part, I'm always thinking of the 30 acres over 10 years and 3 acres a year component that is referenced several times in the study. Our staff is as well. The question also had to do with a desire for the balance between recreation space in our parks and open space. We're thinking about open space in Benjamin Banneker. We're thinking about it at the Harris Teeter project, where we really focused on open space. And there's also a desire for flexible use, which has been brought to us recently as well. So we do think about those concerns regularly. Our capital improvement plan, I often think of as like a competition. We have so many different plans. We have the bicycle element, bicycle transportation plans. We have a desire for additional funding for infrastructure, which we need as well. So our capital improvement plans make it difficult as we seek to work all those priorities together under limited funding. That's what leads to goals like the 30 acres and goals like, for example, our affordable housing goals every year, which we haven't met either. But we've actually, I feel, come closer to the 30 acres. I guess I would say it's a competition that each of us as board members is aware of and our staff is aware of. So that's kind of how I'd start to approach that. There's I don't know if colleagues want to add. There's also a question with respect to the Rouse property, but I'll first see if colleagues wanted to add. I can't quite see everybody, so I'll just sort of trust at the moment. So I'll trust that if colleagues wanted to also chime in, you will unmute and jump in. I'll just finish with respect to this part of Parks and Recreation with respect to there's a question about the Rouse property and the 2016 needs assessment survey. As soon as we heard rumblings that the Rouse property we have been contacted by numerous residents about it. We have been contacted about the property. The owner has indicated that they were not interested initially in our offer and selling to us, and which we reached out to them as soon as we heard about this. And that does not mean we have not continued to follow up, but we have not gotten the response that we would like with respect to the Rouse property as far as looking into it and funding. Funding is a component that we have to consider as we approach there's some by right development that is available at the Rouse property. So we are aware of this, following up on this, And we also are mindful of the cost involved. So there are others on the board who have perhaps additional thoughts on the Rouse property, but that's after looping back on a weekly basis with our manager. That's what I'd say to this point. Others, colleagues?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to add another, Mr. Carantonis, I'm probably going to take you away from the point. I just wanted to add a sort of associated point on historic preservation, because there are a lot of people concerned about the not just the green space and that sort of thing, but the historic preservation. And we are in discussion. While the owners have not been very receptive at all to doing anything other than building houses on it, they are receptive, I believe, to our going in and documenting the house and documenting the property to preserve at least the historic record. So for those interested in historic issues, that is going on. So I just thought I would add that. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Mr. Carantonis. Go ahead.
Oh, I just, there was a short question that I saw here popping on the chat. Where is the Rolls property? And it is in Dominion Hills. And that was there is significant press coverage for this, local press coverage for this estate and what it used to be, what it has been in the last decades and what it is today.
Great, thanks, Mr. Carantonis. I know we talked about, Mr. Gadjahar, we talked about, and I appreciate you referencing our illustrious work on the School Budget Commission several years back. We talked about having a chance for a follow-up question in this area. I don't know if Civic, if you want to put this to the Civic Federation as a whole, if there's a follow-up question on Parks and Recreation and open space. We do have a number of other categories, but go ahead.
I'm looking in the chat here, and there's one from Mr. Gelman. If they're going to fill the Rouse property with housing, has anyone looked at the traffic impact?
So that's certainly a fair question. There's some challenges that we have with respect to development. There's the concept of by right development, and we certainly can have reasonable limitations there, but strictly precluding the development of housing that is already allowed under zoning there is not something that we would have the easy authority to do under Virginia law, as far as I understand it. I don't know if colleagues, we certainly would love to have additional authority, but the history, as I understand it, of property right development in Virginia as a whole has been challenging. That doesn't mean, as you know, that Mr. Gelman, that we wouldn't want to assert as much as we can in that right, but traffic per se, according to my understanding, would not enable us to preclude the by right development that is there. I don't know if that's, I see a nod from Ms. Crystal. I don't know, other colleagues, if you have thoughts.
I think that's well put, Mr. DeFerranti, and just anticipating that we've got quite a few other questions coming in about denser development in whatever forms it may take. This is an excellent reminder that folks have basic property rights. In the vast majority of the land in Arlington County zoned residential, their by right option is the least amount of housing, or the least amount of density rather, but they have to be allowed some amount of housing. And so in fact, sometimes having this zoning for the least possible amount of density means that we as a community have the least ability to plan for it, require community benefits like contributions to transit, and otherwise weigh in on traffic plans when something is the lowest possible density developed by right.
Yeah. So I suggest that we step forward to the housing set of questions, if that will be okay with you. So housing, we've got a couple of different of our members on tap, and I think, let's see, did you want to start? We talked about affordable housing distribution. Mr. Dorsey, did you want to go start there?
Thank you, Mr. DeFerranti. Yes, I do believe you tapped me to do that. So the question is, building upon what has been a long community conversation and what is described as a broad consensus that committed affordable housing should be more evenly and equitably distributed throughout our county. What steps is the board taking to implement this consensus? In many ways, the board worked with the community to develop this consensus. It is spoken to in our affordable housing master plan, so guiding policy that we seek to have a sufficient and equitable distribution of committed affordable housing. And over the past few years, I think there have been some notable achievements in that regard. Major projects in Roslyn, for example, on transit that are 100% affordable, but even beyond that, providing a lot of incentives and persuasion to get on-site units in areas that hitherto were not made available for committed affordable units, where developers would seek to do their affordable housing requirements and have them effectuated off-site. We're getting more of those coming on-site. Through the work of Housing Arlington, we're looking at a lot of different initiatives to ensure that committed can be made available when otherwise wholesale redevelopment occurs. Think about the Housing Conservation District work, which is looking at a lot of our older market rate affordable communities and providing some opportunities and incentives for those to maintain committed affordable units, again, in areas that are traditionally underrepresented with committed affordable units. There's also a new study which is going to commence in 2021, the multi-family reinvestment study. I just cite all of these things to say that this is very much a guiding priority of the county. As everyone knows who follows this issue, we're dealing with the countervailing effects of market forces, which have the price of the cost of land being in areas where there tend to be a higher concentration of affordable units. And we also have development activity, which is along our transit corridors, of which Columbia Pike is one. However, we are taking intentional steps to ensure that affordable homes and the families that occupy those affordable homes are able to live throughout our county, and that we don't just simply concentrate them to specific areas. So I would sum it up to say that the consensus is felt by the county, it's reflected in our plans, and it's being manifest in the results.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorsey. I guess what I'll suggest is that we go through a couple of these housing questions and then come back, if that's without objection. I see there's a question on, go ahead.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, well, I would like to add to Mr. Dorsey's excellent description of what the intention and the goals of the policy goals of Arlington County is that preservation of market rate affordable units is critical for a successful distribution of affordable housing. We don't want to talk only about committed affordable housing, which is difficult to produce, difficult to locate, difficult to make happen in an efficient and fiscally responsible way. But we have also to preserve, we want to preserve market rate affordable units as good as we can, everywhere we can. And they are already well distributed in Arlington County. The Civic Federation provided a question on housing conservation districts, and Mr. Dorsey already referenced the study we do in multifamily preservation. And this is really an effort that will be very focused in studying how best we can keep multifamily units that already exist around, so that they add to our market for this. I should also add that since I remember, policymakers here in Arlington County, we always wanted to attract diverse income levels in all districts in Arlington. It's not only that we want to distribute affordable housing, we want to also bring higher, medium, and higher income households in places where they weren't before. And this continues to be an goal. So in the western end of Columbia Pike, the goal was always to preserve what was there, no net new, preserve what was there, the families of 60% AMI, for example, that we had there, but create an environment, a policy environment where new families, new households who make a little bit more than that, who are more closer to the medium middle class, would find it attractive to move in and balance socially, culturally, and resource-wise the area.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Your experience before coming to the board is evident in so much of what you covered, as well as, frankly, Mr. Dorsey, your thoughts too. I think I want to just switch a little bit as far as order and see if we can go. There was a question regarding missing middle that Ms. Crystal, you were teed up to talk about. So why don't you go ahead?
Thank you so much. And I'll paraphrase the question, although I see Eric Cassell doing yeoman's work, pasting the questions in full in the chat. Eric, thank you for that work. I'll briefly say, as this is my first question to answer, a big thank you to the Civic Federation and certainly to your chair, Ellen Gadjahar, for welcoming us and facilitating a great conversation. So I will try to be brief, but this is hard because this is a topic about which I am impassioned. And the question was a great one. It was essentially, if missing middle is not going to deliver a housing that's affordable, right? We're talking about affordable housing, then why do it? So without getting too far down the rabbit hole of the premise, we've talked a little bit about affordable housing, and a lot of times we use that as shorthand for folks making maybe 30%, 40%, up to 60% of area median income. And so if simply allowing more zoning flexibilities is not going to deliver housing that's affordable for purchase to somebody making, say, 50% of the area median income, what's the point? It's a great question. I'm going to give you two high-level answers. The first starts with a pretty remarkable statistic, and I'm stealing this from the National Building Museum that had a great exhibit on the need for these different types of housing a couple of years ago. 20% of American households live in nuclear families right now. 20%. That means 4 out of 5 of us are living in some kind of household that looks different than mom, dad, 2.5 kids, Spot the dog and Felix the cat. People are living with roommates. They're living in non-traditional family situations. They're living independently. And our housing supply in Arlington, as nationally, has not kept up. What we are seeing, and I know what you're seeing in your neighborhoods because I'm seeing it in mine, outside of our densest corridors, we are seeing a lot of really large homes for single families. And that's not an accident. It's because, broadly speaking, 79% of the land in Arlington that is zoned residential, by right, it's illegal to build anything else other than that one home on one lot. And so, of course, with land being as valuable as it is in Arlington, we're seeing folks maximize what that one house that they're allowed to build can look like. And that doesn't match what our families need. So if you are an empty nester that's ever looked at your spouse and said, I'd really love to stay in our neighborhood, but there's nowhere for us to go if we downsize, then that's an example of why we need missing middle housing. If you're ever someone who thought, like a dear friend of mine recently decided, I'd really love the opportunity to invest in a row house with my sister and help raise her kid together, then there's nothing for you. There's relatively little for you in Arlington County. And you've moved, as my friend did, to Baltimore to find it. I look out every day at the project I live in. I live in a townhouse. We're surrounded by a row of townhouses, a few single family houses with one shared common yard anchored by a majestic old 6-story oak tree, right? And if you can't find that in your neighborhood, it's because it's actually illegal to build it by right in 79% of Arlington County. And so there are all types of housing that are desired by all types of families, and most of it is not legal to build in, again, roughly speaking, 79% of Arlington County. Diverse housing stock allows for a diversity of neighbors, and that's why this is worth doing. But I'll also add one more point without getting too far into the weeds of percent area median income and affordability. I will note that it's important to think about housing affordability more broadly. And if we can legalize forms of housing that could be delivered by right that might be affordable to folks making even 100% of area median income, that does two things. One, it provides housing stock that right now the market is not delivering, because a lot of that new product is much closer to affordable to people making 150% or more of area median income. But it also gives our middle income subsidy programs a fighting shot to work. And those of you who study well or know well about our rental programs know this kind of dance. In order for our housing grants programs to work, we need committed affordable units, because you can't just give somebody making 40% of area median income a housing grant for, even $1,000 a month and say, off you go into the market. Good luck finding a $5,000 a month 3-bedroom apartment, right? It doesn't work. You need both the stock that's more moderate income that we achieve through the committed affordable units, paired with the housing grant to help folks meet that gap between their income and what's available. And so similarly, we actually have programs. Folks are often surprised to learn. We have a moderate income purchase assistance program. We have live where you work grants. But if you are a moderate income second-year teacher, third-year firefighter, GS-11 Fed, maybe, those moderate income programs don't get you anywhere in a lot of our market, and certainly in a lot of our different neighborhoods, because the purchase price is just too high. And so that's where the difference of an $800,000 half of a duplex really sounds catastrophically high, especially, if you bought your home 30, 40 years ago. But it makes a huge difference between that and that $1.5 million new construction. And the difference it makes, among others, is that it gives those purchasing assistance programs a chance to work and a chance to help more moderate income folks fill that delta with our programs. So those are just a couple of sort of reasons to pursue missing middle housing. In short, because more diverse housing stock helps meet the needs of more diverse neighbors. And again, to give those moderate income purchasing assistance programs, live where you work programs, a fighting chance to help moderate income earners buy in Arlington County.
You're muted, Matt.
It happens. Thank you, Alan. It happens once each board meeting. And so clearly, Ms. Crystal, you got a ton of passion about that. I know that will prompt follow-up questions. I would just like to see if Ms. Garvey, there are a couple of questions around housing, and wanted to see if you wanted to add your thoughts. One was on the costs and benefits. I think also another is commercial building conversion. So on housing, if you wanted to kind of paraphrase and add your thoughts, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit. I mean, the cost and the benefit, that gets back to this actually a very specific issue. People talk about this Tischler bias, or B's, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, method for looking at fiscal impact analysis. And, some of our neighboring jurisdictions use it. We have been looking at it. I just got an update. We're actually in the process right now of scoping a contract to have that kind of an analysis done. So for those who have been, wondering why we're not doing it and thinking we should do it, we're moving forward to doing it. And that should be ready. I don't have soon. They asked for a date. I can't give you a date specific, but soon. And I think once we get the scope done and the contract let, then we'll be announcing that. So we'll let people know. And then I realized I did not look the converting from commercial to residential. We have done some of that. We're continuing to look at that. And I expect a lot will come out. Sort of that's going to be a little bit the fallout from 2020, right? Is looking at how we can do that. So I expect to see some more projects like that coming forward, and new looks at things. So that's definitely on our radar scope.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. And so I wondered if there were follow-up questions that.
There is one. There's one from Mr. Hosea Stevenson in Clarendon Courthouse. Has the county looked at a development bonus that would be feasible for getting one or more CAFs on typical residential lots north of 29? For example, would a private owner find it worth building a approximately 10-unit apartment building on a typical single-family lot in Donaldson Run if they had to provide one CAF in it.
Matt, I'm happy to start with this one. Yeah, this is a great question, and it's something we've looked at a lot. And I can say on a personal note, I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, that has something very similar to this, and through inclusionary zoning. As I know, Josiah knows, because he knows the Virginia context even better than I do, right? We're not able to require that, and so hence his question about, is there an incentive? I will say this, I think what we've tried to kind of scope out with the missing middle is a lot of what could we expect the markets to do if projects were allowed by right. The question of how might we achieve required density, or excuse me, how might we allow for enough density to realize required on-site affordable, has been within the scope of the Housing Conservation District's work, which has included a couple of areas around, for example, Lee Highway. So that's sort of how do we get, really, especially north of the route of the RB corridor, that has been a piece of it as well. So a roundabout way of saying, that's sort of not quite at the core of the missing middle scope, but I think it's within what we're talking about here. And what I would say, what we're talking about here are these trade-offs. Are we comfortable with mid-rise apartment buildings in areas that have historically been very low density if it means achieving affordability? I think I've heard from some Arlingtonians that there is interest. I've heard from others that there is less so, right? Because there's real concern about density and what that might mean for other impacts. So I do think this question, although not at the heart of what's been scoped out for missing middle, maybe a little more akin to what we discussed in housing conservation districts, is nevertheless very much part of that conversation. And so I suspect, Josiah, and I know others are involved as community partners or otherwise signed up for that missing middle study group, but would urge that you do subscribe to updates as a way of sort of raising your own voice if you feel strongly about it one way or another, or really want to emphasize that there's some desire to get those land use tools like that development bonus in the conversation as well.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. I know, I thought it was so in your wheelhouse that I let you go first, but I also think that Mr. Karantonis and others may have thoughts on this. Go ahead.
Ms. Crystal has covered that excellently. The only addition I would want to make, actually two. One is tackling housing affordability is also an economic, sustainability issue. Each and every one of the typical households that Ms. Crystal has described, that would be, our target group for missing middle housing, are essential for our economic welfare right now in Arlington. And right now we're facing a situation where all these people, all these households, very productive households, have to actually leave Arlington County and, in the old-fashioned style, to drive until they qualify, with extreme costs for themselves, for our society as a whole, for the taxpayer at the end. So actually tackling the issue of a sound balance, of not supply starve our market, not continue to starve our market from supply, is a critical economic development strategy. On the other side, part of the study that I at least expect that part of the study of the missing middle study will be also to see what developers of that type of buildings, of that type of structures, of that size, of the moderate size scale buildings will come forward, and what are their economic model of delivering housing of this type. And this is when the discussion about how we incentivize some additional affordability, how we fit the economics of housing, moderate and even lower income households in the whole mix will reveal. I fully agree with Ms. Crystal that this is exactly what we are doing. We are trying to study that and to find out how it fits in the economics and, of course, in the neighborhood dynamics of any given place.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. I mean, for my part, I'll just say that, duplexes, townhomes, and I focused in my remarks just now on mid-rise, a little closer to population corridors. So what you've heard from Mr. Carantonis, each of us, is evidence that we are still thinking through the ideas. This is not set, but the broad concept that we need to be a place that makes it more possible for market rate solutions to work, so that more moderate income GS11 teachers, firefighters can afford to buy, is a shared set of ideas that lead us to want to move forward in the missing middle housing types. So don't see hands. I
actually have a question on that, Mr. Ferranti. This is something that I've come across myself. Has there ever been any discussion for alternative ownership models, as an example, community land trusts in Arlington as an option?
Yes, I think I have to plead. I actually did a fair bit of reading, and several of us have looked into that. It is not something that has moved forward. That the reading that I have done is not something. It is something we've looked at, but it's not something we've been able to do. There is some challenges when the land is already, in my view, when the land is already very costly. But I see Ms. Crystal Ann wants to chime in, and others as well. Go ahead, Kate.
I'll try to be brief, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to a couple of housing experts about this a year or so ago. And I think the consensus is that allowing additional zoning or additional units to be built is going to be a necessary but not sufficient requirement. And I'll say just another word about what I mean for that. Right now, community land trusts work best when land is relatively affordable to acquire. That is not Arlington. And so right now, for a land trust to be acquiring a parcel that may cost $500,000 or $600,000 just to acquire and put one home on it, it's not going to pencil out. It's why a community land trust model hasn't really taken off here. It's why, frankly, we don't see more Habitat for Humanity here in Arlington either. What I've heard from Habitat, from experts in the community land trust model is, if we can build a fourplex on that piece of land, then all of a sudden it makes sense for our nonprofit, for our investors, for our model to try to invest in that land and keep it within community ownership. So I think, again, that sort of legalization of alternatives rather than just one house per one lot is going to be something that we have to at least start with before we can really start to explore land trust, Habitat for Humanity, other models. Otherwise, the cost of building that one house is just going to be prohibitive because of the cost of land in Arlington.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. I've looked at it. I think there was either Durham or Baltimore. There've been some other communities where land trusts have worked. So I don't know if there are other pieces to add. I know, Mr. Carantonis, you know this area well. I guess I would, any thoughts or wanting?
Crystal is absolutely correct. There has to be a return on the investment of the land trust. The land trust has to raise the money to buy that piece of land, and it has to be able to put enough value and enough value added on this land in order to make it work. Now, the good news is that land in Arlington, it is scarce, it's not available, but it has a steady appreciation. So this is an incentive on one side. And if we can find places where we can loosen up the zoning restrictions, then, as Ms. Crystal mentioned, we have a chance to, get offers and get, engagement from developers that would invest this way in a community land trust. And there's still opportunities around. So that's, so there's scarcer by the week almost.
Well, I've been trying to think of it in terms of could that apply to a condo apartment building? I think it could, but there's more to do and to think about there. I see a question that we will get to in the chat from Kit and also Jesse. I guess what I'd suggest is, so that we cover some of the other areas, and frankly, because I actually I'm interested in sort of an update on this. This is an area I've worked on actually was interested in legislation. There's a couple of different subjects, and I wondered if Mr. Dorsey, maybe you could speak to the question on broadband. If you're set, because I have followed, but I
Sure.
also benefit from your wisdom, frankly.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. DiFerranti. So there was a question that I'm sure Eric will put up in the chat soon, but it's how is Arlington doing with reaching students with broadband? And is there full coverage? If not, what's the timetable? And are costs for descriptions being defrayed for students where needed? So I'll try to attack that efficiently. One, the issues of providing broadband, fortunately for us, even though we didn't anticipate that it would be such a need this particular year, we foresaw this over the course of the past several years, and as part of our digital equity initiatives, have been looking at how to make sure we provide quality broadband for households that do not have access at all, or do not have access to quality enough broadband to meet the needs of what we were thinking then was the modern information economy, but certainly very applicable to the distance learning needs of schools. So multiple solutions were able to be deployed pretty quickly once the pandemic hit and students were forced into distance learning. One, we provided funding so that there could be wired connections where possible, where we could actually get the ISPs to deliver hardwired broadband to homes with students. That certainly did not account for all of the needs, so that there were a variety of other solutions later on top of that. Personal Wi-Fi hotspots, the initial tranche of those were insufficient for the needs of video uploads. So we found ones with even more capacity. Then when that wasn't sufficient for all of the needs that we could see, we looked to amplify the Wi-Fi signals in our public facilities and even create new Wi-Fi hotspots throughout neighborhoods where we know we had a demonstrated need. All those together have produced about 96% of students logging on for a number of hours a day to participate in distance learning. And that compares favorably to what we typically see with in-person instruction, with the number of students attending on a daily basis. But our goal is to reach every student and to make sure that that availability of broadband is not a reason why they're not able to participate. And APS is looking to identify the individual cases, work on a case-by-case basis to identify who is being left behind and what's needed to support them. And as part of all of this, we are beginning a study to look at how we make broadband more widely available at lower cost to our affordable housing communities. That study is going to produce a lot of data for us to figure out how we make sure the broadband penetration reaches all who need it. And there's some interesting and positive news on the federal front that we're still trying to unpack. There are dollars that are going to be available. We expect for providing support for families to get internet access. Who will benefit from that in Arlington? We don't quite know yet, given the work that we've done already, but there are, at least in the newest federal relief bill, some funds for that. And as to the question of subscriptions and costs being defrayed for students where needed, most of what students need is provided on an enterprise-wide level from APS. So it is available at no cost. And if there are any specific subscriptions or services that you are interested in, please populate them in the chat, and I'll try to make sure that that's answered before we leave.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey.
Could I just add something real quickly? I think I can speak for maybe the whole board when I say, because behind all of this, often we hear about the internet as a public utility. And I believe all five of us really philosophically think the internet should be a public utility. So, but we're up against a lot of different, issues with Virginia. But that is behind. I would say that's probably a goal for all of us, because that's really the only thing that makes sense. And then, Mr. Dorsey, I see a question in the chat, which I believe we have this training, but I'm not positive. Marcia Semmel asked if there's broadband access training for people across the age spectrum, and what kind of training we have for people to help them get online. And I'm not really
Yeah.
sure about the answer to that. I know we do have some things, but I'm not sure. I can't list them all.
We do. There are a variety of things that I'm aware of. Certainly for students, there are a variety of programs that are available for students all throughout elementary, middle, and high school. But then for people in our community at large, there are things that are offered from Arlington County as part of our, I believe, is it the Engage program that looks to provide educational opportunities for older adults? There are some technological literacy training and skills building sessions that are available through there. There are other services that are provided from our partner agencies that do periodic technical literacy programs that are offered through other Arlington County initiatives. Whether we're reaching every stage across the lifespan, I'm not entirely sure. There might be sort of a donut hole for people who are in that adult to pre-senior age cohort. The offerings for them might not be plentiful, but if they are connected to our Department of Human Services for workforce support, they have ample access to training on digital literacy that is provided through that.
I would add, pre-pandemic, I think there were some cool programs connecting high school students with adults that needed help. So sort of a cross-generational kind of support system, which was pretty cool. But I'm sure with the pandemic, that's not happening right now.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey and Mr. Dorsey. This is a shared priority, and the county manager has been working hard on it. We want to make additional progress, and as I said, accelerate our progress. But we have worked hard on this. There are some questions as to how best to get it done that are out there, but we are making significant progress. The 500,000, we have some accessibility blasters, and then we have a lot of other, as Mr. Dorsey mentioned, a lot of other ways to work on this. I want to get Mr. Karantonis a chance to talk, and we'll come back to some of these questions in the chat, but I think there was a question with respect to potential renaming that you had, Mr. Karantonis.
Oh, yes, but the question, I think, was a completely different topic. It is about the last year we, starting with the Lee Highway renaming process, which I think is exemplary in all possible ways. And I believe that we have to commend the Highway Alliance and the neighbors around Lee Highway that worked very, very diligently in a very open, transparent, equitable way to look at the name and at the change of the name of this major thoroughfare, and made some absolutely excellent proposals. And we are working through these proposals right now. The county manager has correct me if I'm wrong, I believe in the December meeting, yes, in the December meeting, he has proposed a process where for renaming of streets or other, toponyms in Arlington, that that there will be an advisory commission or an advisory body, and they will be weighing in on these proposals every 2 years, twice a year. And on top of that, for with side plans, with major changes that come with our sector plans, etc., there are renaming requests basically very, very often. So there is a process now in place. It's an ordered process. It gives time and access to everybody who has a stake in this process. And it really, I think it's a very equitable and fair way to approach that. On the county logo, this was a different discussion. And for that, I believe that the understanding matured that this logo was not sustainable anymore. It was offensive for a great deal of Arlingtonians, I believe for the vast majority of Arlingtonians. And once one realizes, myself, I have to say included, once realizes what the logo really was depicting, it was impossible to unsee it. So we have a decision on the table to retire this logo and to replace it. And there will be, and the county manager, we approved a a process that the county manager has proposed to open a public process in the next month, and beginning this month, actually, to get ideas about the values, what the logo should represent, how Arlington should be represented in its logo. This is not an easy question; it's a quite complicated question, and gather public input, and then later sit with professionals and work through the proposals, and eventually have a replacement for the Arlington County logo. And after that, the replacement will happen in a gradual way of replacing the logo as it is today, printed and presented everywhere, gradually through retiring, and as we have to replace things, as we have to do new, we will be putting the new logo after that. So in the most cost-effective way, but a deliberate way. I think that this is it's of course a symbolic issue, the logo, but it sets the frame for the conversation, and it revealed a lot of issues and a lot of things that Arlingtonians have been thinking but haven't been able to discuss in public until this summer of 2020, where we have this ongoing discussion about racial equity. I do believe that it was a very revealing conversation, and will be a very revealing conversation as we go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. I'm mindful of time, and I want to try and get to the big issues that are out there that you have asked that we have not yet covered. I think maybe, and we will certainly come back. The question that Nancy Springer just put is the one that I was going to suggest we go to, which is, I think, Ms. Garvey, there was a question that went to the task force that the Civic Federation is. We probably each heard from members of the Civ Fed about ranked choice voting, and there's a couple of questions in there if you want to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reading the question right now about would we consider. I know the ranked choice voting is moving forward. I expect we're going to get there. We've actually our registrar's office is working on that, trying to figure out how much it's going to cost. So we're certainly interested in that. And I think ranked choice voting is really an interesting way to make a lot of decisions. So thank you for bringing that up. And I appreciate the Civ Fed pushing this forward. The question, and I'll be quick, I think, because and maybe if Eric can get it up in the chat, because, or at least maybe everybody knows, there's a whole list of what you all are looking at in your study of county government. And I think it's great. You asked what to add. If anybody listened to my remarks earlier, you'll know what I'm going to say. The one thing I think we need to add is, should county board member jobs be part-time? And if you think they should be part-time, well, how much? 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week? And if it's that, what do you want us to not do or do? I stated all the things we do, we're kind of available 24/7. We come to events like this. It's late at night. We've had other meetings. We represent regional groups. When there's a crisis, people turn to us for leadership, as they should. I mean, I think this board is doing a great job. This is what we should be doing. We handle, we're ultimately responsible for budgets. If you look at not just Arlington County, but any kind of city councilor in Northern Virginia and county board, responsible for budgets in the millions and billions of dollars. And yet we're supposed to be doing it part-time because we're supposed to have another job. And I just would posit and have for a while that this is totally unreasonable in 2020 for what the service that people need and want from us. And I think what people expect from us is absolutely reasonable. What's unreasonable is to expect that we're able to have another job to support families. So anyway, I would absolutely want to add that. And I appreciate the opportunity to get on my soapbox and talk about it a little bit. Thank you. You asked for a couple of questions about what you should consider. One is cost, which I mentioned earlier. So whatever kind of suggestions you come forward with, if we're going to make any decisions, cost would certainly be important to know about. And then finally, a lot of these decisions will probably need General Assembly approval. So that's something to factor into your thinking. and if we even wanted to implement them, we'd need to get it through the General Assembly. So that's just something to keep in mind. So I know I'm kind of mindful of time. And again, I appreciate being able to get up on the soapbox, and I'm happy to talk about this with anybody anytime. But I think we've got other questions to handle tonight. Thank you. Let me see if there's any more in the chat. Somebody agrees with me. Thank you. Stevenson, I appreciate it.
There are a lot of, several of these questions have subparts, and I want to seek to get to all broadly, or as many of the questions as we can broadly. I had a question about the governor's just released proposed budget amendments. I think, and there was also a question about Metro and federal support that Ms. Crystal may want to touch on. Given the recently passed stimulus, it's different from where we were 2 weeks ago for sure. The proposed budget amendments, this is a very, very tough session in Richmond because there's a limited number of bills allowed. It's all being done electronically. And some of the fiscal decisions, we're in a more constrained fiscal environment in talking with Pat Carroll, our legislative lead. So we will always be interested in funding for eviction prevention and the Housing Trust Fund, funding for social services. And these are stated priorities. Teacher pay raises are also stated priorities, or additional funding for education is a stated priority in the county board's legislative package. So we're interested, but I will say that it's a very difficult environment in which to pass and to pursue some of the governor's proposed suggestions. Certainly he's a big addition, but I want to sort of manage a little bit our expectations as far as what we'll be seeking. Our legislative package is more focused, frankly, on other areas. We have a small issue related to Medicaid with our CSB, but our legislative package is also focused on voting and some of the other issues, and budget related issues are of course important, but not the focal point. Do you want to touch Metro, Katie? Absolutely.
So appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This has been huge. I want to start by giving credit where it's due. By all accounts, our senator from Virginia, Mark Warner, was instrumental in getting the funding for public transit in general and Metro in specific into that hotly debated congressional stimulus bill. And so, I always try to shout out the other elected officials that made things happen. And so he's been just a great advocate at that table, that compromise table. So the numbers are still fluctuating a little bit. I've been sort of looking at my notes from my last conversations with Virginia's representative, or one of Virginia's 2 representatives to the Metro board. We had heard as high as $800 million for the region. Realistically, it's probably going to be a little bit closer to $500 million for the region, and that includes VRE, the bus systems, and the OmniRide system, which does that long haul commuter bus from Prince William and Point South. WMATA is likely looking in the realm of 320 billion. What's encouraging about that number is that some of you have seen the rather catastrophic forecast for the fiscal 22 budget that more or less gutted Metro Rail and Metro Bus as we know it, to close a gap that is forecasted at about 500 billion. So if we can realize that 320, it's not as simple as simply applying all of that to fiscal 22. And I believe that there'll be some debates ahead among the compact members. We are, of course, as Virginia, merely 1/3 of decision making at Metro. There'll probably be some different outlooks about whether that money should be used up front to offset some of the cuts we're living with now, or those that are forecasted to take effect in February, whether it should be all socked away to avoid cuts beginning in July, which may be, knock wood, around the time folks are comfortable getting back on rail and delivering some some fare box recovery so that Metro can get its financial footing back under it that way. So there are some healthy debates ahead. I think, as many of you all know, I serve as chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which is the way that we seek to coordinate ourselves as the Northern Virginia localities. And I know that there is, among the Northern Virginia localities, a strong desire to ensure that when ridership is ready to come back, the service levels are there so that we don't find ourselves in a set of circumstances where just as riders are ready to return to work or return in the evening hours, that they're facing 30-minute headways on rails, significant cuts in bus routes, et cetera, as well as just the overall challenges to equity and to the smart growth of Arlington County that those cuts could provide. So in short, the numbers are fluctuating. We've got good teams at Metro and at the Commission analyzing exactly how much is likely to come to WMATA. There will be some debates ahead about the time frame in which those funds are spent. But I do think I can say with confidence that Northern Virginia is working well as a region to express that desire to ensure that the federal relief can be used to lift us out of that ridership collapse and potential downward spiral so that we don't become trapped in it just as ridership might return.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Mr. Dorsey, did you want to chime in on that one?
Oh, I just wanted to say, in case anybody had the same audio hiccups that I have, the numbers that Ms. Crystal was referencing for Metro and for our region are millions with an M, not billions with a B.
Yes, that's
Millions.
so generous of you to note an audio hiccup rather than an error. It's $500 million is the deficit for fiscal 22. And so we're looking at the hundreds of millions from what was a multi-billion-dollar federal package. Thank you very much, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you. So sort of want to do a little bit of I see a couple of questions and want to kind of do a kind of a round of colleagues if there are questions that you or issues you'd really like to get to that we didn't mention. I'll just quickly try and see if I can address Kit Norland's question with respect to climate change. We are focused on this, so I think most of us mentioned this in our remarks. There's not much secret that we're one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about the Biden administration is just a basic recognition that we have to do more on climate. I also am hopeful from the suggested appointments we have done. Last month, we did a green building incentive policy, which is a significant step forward. We also have the community energy plan and the community energy plan implementation framework. So there are pieces of it. And in our closing remarks, Katie, you can certainly touch on that one. But for now, I'll touch on livability 22202. All of us have been in touch with the 3 civic associations, and our staff has been working regularly with livability 22202. I have more reading to do on some of the reports. They are substantial, but the trade-off between additional revenue from development and negative impacts of development is something that we consider regularly. It's part of our general land use plan assessment. We also look at sector plans, and the costs and benefits of development are a regular piece of our staff's consideration through the LRPC long-range planning. LRPC long-range planning committee, I believe, which does several rounds of discussions for projects and has a role there. So we are always continuing to refine our process. So I'll just leave it there. There are a couple of questions on revenue, but I want to give colleagues a chance to kind of wrap up with touching anything that has not been addressed that you want to make sure you mention. And I don't know, Ms. Garvey, Mr. Carantonis, if you want to start us off, go ahead.
All right, I'll be quick. A quick answer to Steph Pryor's question about glass and recycling. We are going to be doing a whole relook at recycling that we do. If the pandemic hadn't happened, we'd be well into that. So good point. There's a lot that needs to be done on recycling, and it's absolutely on the radar scope. It's absolutely something we want to do. We just weren't able to do it this year. And I would like to talk a little bit, if that's all right, Mr. Chair, on the whole issue of data. There was one question about data. And I don't know if if Eric can get that up in the it was question number 3, because the question asked, will you establish a policy that requires staff to use data in the planning process that will best use limited resources and resolve concerns about misuse of data? So first, using data that best uses limited resources is a best practice for just about everything government does, and we expect that from our staff always. I will say that using data to resolve concerns requires that there's an agreement on the data. And I think sometimes that, we have differences in opinion among stakeholders, and I don't think that means misuse of data. That means there's just a disagreement. And one of the issues that came up is the whole issue of steam restoration, which has been around for about a decade. And our staff actually went to outside consultants to verify their work. I personally have had discussions with regional experts about this, and all of them had supported our staff's conclusion. So my conclusion about, after years, and I assume our boards too, after years of these discussions, the data is not being misused. There's simply a disagreement about the professional judgment of our staff, and that's a very different thing. And then again, on the Tischler Beisch, since I answered the question way early on, I got a note from our attorney because I sent him a little text, and actually it should be ready in a few months. A few months is what the kind of timeline for that. Finally, on data and equity, I really appreciate that question. So I want to just sort of thank the Civic Federation. Data is absolutely, I believe, key to how we're going to close race-based outcome gaps. Data helps reveal things that have been hidden by the kind of traditional way we approach things. That's what part of what makes racism systemic is it's built into everything. You don't see it. So it's absolutely imperative that we use the racial equity lens, and we use data and tools that we've got to disaggregate the data to identify where there are systemic and institutional racism that it kind of shows itself, and the changes that we need to make to dismantle it. So data is absolutely crucial with that. The county manager and staff are working on a new racial equity data dashboard to better understand. So that will be coming out soon. County manager, has articulated his commitment to objective data-based planning efforts. And finally, I really just want to take this opportunity to thank the many Civic Federation members who have been participating in the dialogues on race and equity. And the assessment we've been doing, this initial body of work is going to do a lot to help inform our actions moving forward. This is a long-term effort. It requires everybody's, sort of commitment and work over time. And thank you so much, the Civic Federation, for being part of that, because you're absolutely a crucial part of it. So thank you. So I'm going to just end with a thank you, and that's it. Thank you. Thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Sure. Thank you. I'm getting used to saying Ms. Garvey instead of Madam Chair. You are still a chair in part of my mind. Mr. Karantonis.
I want to also thank the Civic Federation for this session today. I think it's a very good tradition to uphold and to have a conversation about what our current policy positions are, where Arlington is today, and how we look at the next year. I just want to make a couple of footnotes. Ms. Garvey mentioned, our immediate past chair, mentioned data. Not only do we use data, of course we do use data, but we also make them available to everybody to see them. There is we have a website for that. It's data.arlingtonva.us. I think it's very interesting for those of you who want to tinker a little bit and download a few bigger data sets and work with them. I think they are very, very valuable. And they actually promote and sustain a healthy community dialogue. The questions that we get when they are data informed, when they are based in analysis, that doesn't mean that we will always agree, and that staff will always having the same data set doesn't mean always that we will come to the same conclusion on policy questions. So I'm just saying that we are working hard, and I believe that the county manager has committed to that. And I believe that he's making, and his team are making progress to make as much raw data, as many data as possible available. And this is really important when it begins also on the neighborhood level. So, our traffic data, our housing data, our, a lot of data sets are being made more and more available and more usable for people. For me, the next year, there is clearly one additional focus for me, and I believe that the Civic Federation can play a significant role. It's the new accessibility of our public and consultation and advisory process. We talked a lot this year about equity. We talked a lot about civic leadership, and I believe that this needs to penetrate also in, in how we, how in the governance of our neighborhoods, in the way our neighborhoods are represented, in the way many of you are participating in this Arlington, in the Arlington way. We have a lot of work to do this 2021. We did a lot of diagnostics during 2020. So now it's the time of, converting what we found into actionable steps forward. And I believe that this will be happening, and I'm happy to have your partnership of that. And somebody asked what we can do, what everybody can do to help us with Metro and with, sustaining and rescuing these elementary infrastructural systems. This is a call for you to advocate for them. Ms. Crystal mentioned today that Senator Warner worked very hard for that. It would be great for the Civic Federation to write a thank you to that, to the senator, and reiterate their commitment to support this. This is really critical for Arlington. Everybody needs to hear how important it is. One thing that Ms. Crystal didn't mention, because it's the depressing datum, is that the ridership has fallen down 95%. In the case of the bus system, somewhere between 75 and 80%. This is, she used the verb, the characterization catastrophic. Yes, it is. And it is absolutely unsustainable, I can tell you that as well. So we need to go through this 2021 knowing how big and, the order of magnitude of these challenges. And you are part of, the active citizenship in citizenry in Arlington can be of great help in this.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Mr. Dorsey, did you want any closing thoughts, remarks, questions we haven't gotten to?
I'll be very brief, since it seems inappropriate to close a conversation with the Civic Federation since our relationship is ongoing. So I'll say, President Gajahar, thank you for inviting us to your meeting tonight to give this preview and overview, but I look forward to working with delegates and guests to this meeting on issues that arouse your passion, interest, and curiosity. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Ms. Crystal.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be very brief, but I do want to see if I can't sneak in one more answer, because there is a great question from Tina Warden in the chat, and something I've been really heartened to see CivFed take up as a priority in recent years, 18 months or so, has been the focus on the arts in Arlington. And I think for all of us who consider ourselves patrons or lovers of the arts, or just care about an Arlington that is a soulful and special place to live, this has been top of mind. And so I just wanted to speak really briefly. And one of the things I wanted to do to respond to Tina's question is to share a website with resources for artists and arts groups that our team has been working to compile, everything from webinars to grant application opportunities to other supports, which I think if you love, or are part of an arts organization, that may be a helpful link for you. But most importantly, I think, of course, the thing we've heard of from a lot of our arts organizations is just the need for resources, flexibility of resources, new resources. So just to highlight at a high level, one of the major steps that our team took pretty quickly in partnership with the Arlington Commission for the Arts and with the board's support was converting project grants, which are generally tied to sort of a specific creative output, whether it's a show or a season, into just general operating grants. So really lifting the restrictions that could have prevented that flexibility right away. The small business emergency grant assistance, which has been really important for a lot of our restaurant hospitality industry and others, has also been really important for a lot of arts groups. Over half a dozen, ranging from the Arlington Arts Center to Encore and Priyo Bangla, and many other groups have been recipients of that small business emergency grant assistance program as well. There are a few other things that our Arlington Arts team is working on, chiefly in the area of helping provide resources to support our smaller arts groups in streaming. Those who have been able to adapt have generally been the ones that have been able to move their content online. And that's something that we think the county can play a role in helping have that streaming technology and supports so that every group doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. So sorry, that was my brief bird walk down a question that's really important, close to my heart, and I suspect it to many folks with us tonight. A sincere thanks to the CivFed. This is, I imagine, our first ever virtual meeting with you all, but it's happened really smoothly, and I think is a credit to the passion of this group and the effectiveness of your chair and president's leadership, and I suspect the leadership of the whole executive board in transitioning online. So it's been a pleasure. My hope for the new year is that before too long we will be, seeing you all drinking punch in the back of a county meeting in some form or fashion. I'm really looking forward to being able to do that again, and hope to do all that we can to hasten that day. So thanks again.
Thank you, Katie, and Ms. Crystal. And I just want to briefly add my thanks. All of colleagues, and really, I think it's the right note to start and to end on. And Ms. Crystal started with it after I jumped right into the policy discussion. So I want to reiterate thanks. There is one question that we haven't answered that I will was in the chat that I'll just briefly mention. It's regarding finances in our county auditor, and that is one is about resources. I do want to let everyone know that our current budget, the manager is asking for proposals for cuts to every department. Of it's, I don't think it's a state secret. It's a significant percentage, not 10%, but it's right up there. 6% is asking for cuts. So because of the challenges we're facing with respect to our budget as a whole, so that is a relevant consideration to the additional revenue. We have continued to work with our auditor, and we will continue to work to see how we can realize savings. Part of our audit structure is a collaborativeness that leads to long-term policy changes in specific areas. So we are continuing to work there, and I will have to sort of leave it there. And there will be additionally, Mr. Carantonis and Mr. Dorsey will be working with the audit committee. I do want to give Mr. Gajahar, Alan, I want to give you the last thought, other than just to reiterate the thanks for the partnership. I know that there's been 50 or 70 in our boardroom for this the last couple of years, but I'm not sure that 74 have stayed this long. And I would say this is an indication that virtual meetings do have some benefits. We tried to get to every one of your questions, or as many of your questions as we could. So with that, thanks. And the note, I can't help but noticing, because my cursor is right at Lois Kuntz's kind thought about civility and collegiality. And I'll send it to you, President Gajahar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chairman Ferranti, Ms. Garvey, Mr. Carantonis, Mr. Dorsey, and Ms. Crystal for joining us. This is an excellent tradition. I'm glad to continue to be part of it. I think this worked very well on Zoom. This new feature, being able to spotlight multiple people, is a new thing. I thought that was pretty cool too. And we really appreciate your thorough answers to almost every question that we posed. And we look forward, and I'll speak on behalf of the committee chairs and all the members as well, to continue engagement with you and your staff to address our shared mission, the improvement and betterment of the life here in Arlington on all behalf of all of our citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
And I'm just moving the spotlight.